And we're live. So, as everyone knows, gas prices, energy prices are going a lot higher. It's worse in Europe than it is here. But don't worry, the masterminds at play have a solution. Well, actually, it turns out their solution is about to make the energy crisis much, much worse. We're going to be talking about that in today's episode of Justin and Donald Save America. But before we jump into those topics, I will put that message out there to everyone that I do at the beginning of all of these episodes that you can help us out by doing a couple of things that only take you a few seconds, won't take you one nickel, and that is just hitting that like button, sharing this content, subscribing if you haven't already, leaving a comment underneath these videos, all things that won't cost you a nickel, but helps us break through these big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from reaching more eyeballs. Justin, stems from this conversation that we're going to have, stems from an article that you had published recently at Red State titled How Banks Biden the United Nations Will Soon Make the Global Energy Crisis Much Worse. Care to explain why?
Yes. I think that this is one of those stories that's just not getting the same it's not getting the level of attention that it deserves. It's actually a really important point. There's this movement going on right now across the world to impose a decarbonization of the global economy. They want to get rid of fossil fuels globally. And this movement, which is, I don't want to say it's being led by Joe Biden. He's one of the leaders of this movement. There are many other people who are involved in it internationally. People who are part of the Great Reset movement, Brian Moynihan over at Bank of America, Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, John Kerry, who's the climate czar in Biden's administration, Al Gore, of course, who's just a loser. There's a lot of people who are involved all over the world, big corporations, big businesses, BlackRock, Larry Fink, all Vanguard, all these people, right? But and they have been causing, they're part of the reason why we're seeing gas prices go so high. They're part of the reason why oil and gas production are not expanding in the way that they should be expanding. They're a big part of the reason for why Europe is so dependent, has been so dependent historically on Russia for its natural gas and other things. It's a huge, massive problem. It's all driven by their ideology about climate change. But putting that aside, given the situation that we're in right now, where gas prices are incredibly high in the United States and all over Europe as well, when we have legitimately supply chain crises and all kinds of other energy related issues, the cost of it's a big reason why inflation generally is rapidly expanding in the United States and elsewhere. We just had recent inflation numbers come out that said that inflation for last month, meaning in, I guess, June, was over 9%, I think, right? Is that right? Just over
9.1, yeah.
9.1%. It's the worst inflation we've had in, more than 40 years. Why is all this happening? It's because gas prices and energy prices and all of these things are being driven by partially the war that's going on in Ukraine. Yes, without a doubt. But also because of these climate policies, energy policies that the governments all over the world have been putting in place, and also because of this coordination that we call the Great Reset between financial institutions, investment management firms, insurance companies, big corporations, all of these people also working to decarbonize. All right. So the reason I say things are going to get a lot worse is because this is already a massive problem. It's been causing a lot of issues. But the reason I think it's going to get worse is because in this movement, there has been a push to actually put their foot on the gas pedal to make this thing to accelerate things. Even though we're in the midst of this energy crisis, they're actually working to accelerate it. And the best example of that is these recent updates to there's a set of guidelines that the United Nations Race to Zero campaign has put out. Race to Zero is this international campaign to get eventually to net zero carbon dioxide emissions, okay, by I think 2050 or something like that is the goal. Part of that, or aligned with that, is a group called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero that emerged out of the most recent big climate change conference, COP26, which was in Glasgow this past year in 2021. So this group, this Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, is a group of corporations, banks, financial institutions, all the people I was just talking about before. All the big major US banks and European banks are involved in this. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street Global Advisors, they're all in some way involved in this movement, or at least I'm pretty sure that all three of them are. I know BlackRock is. And then you have a whole bunch of investment management firms. You've got Alliance, insurance companies, and other groups, right? They're all working together as part of this Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero to use their financial power in the private sector to force corporations, businesses, and individuals to get rid of fossil fuels. All right. Not just in their own businesses. Like, we're not talking about them strapping solar panels to the roofs of their buildings. We're talking about them doing that, plus no longer lending to people, businesses that are in the fossil fuel industry, phasing out their financing of the auto industry's production of gasoline powered cars. Like, these are the kinds of things they've been talking about doing. Well, recently, this Glasgow Financial Alliance to Net Zero and this Race to Zero campaign, they're updating their standards for membership in this. So all the big financial institutions, all the big groups have already signed up for this, right? $130 trillion of wealth is in this group already globally. And now they're updating the standards so that in order to continue being in this group, the members are now expected to rapidly, within the next year, come up with a plan that will phase out all new production, all new financing, all new production of fossil fuels, all new, any kind of new fossil fuel production. They're trying to limit that, stop that right away. No more financing of coal plants, all kinds of different things, right? And then they have to put a transition plan in place that will not only do that in the short term, but also will establish goals for their longer term. How do we get rid of the existing stuff we have in our portfolio now? So do we already have customers in our supply chain that are using gasoline powered cars, or are we financing some existing fossil fuel company or something? How do we phase that out too? You have to put that plan into place. And so again, the goal here is to accelerate the decarbonization of the global economy while energy prices are already historically high, right? And in addition to all of that, probably the craziest part.
Well, let's get to the craziest part in a minute here, because I have some questions based on just the things that you're saying so far. So this Race to Zero thing, that dates back a little bit further, right? Like that's not like, I know it's generally new, but that goes back a few years at least, right?
Yeah, it's within the past few years. It may even be within the past couple of years, but it really was ramped up with that Glasgow meeting. That was the whole point of it, was to build momentum leading into the Glasgow COP26 meeting at the end of 2021. So within the past couple of years, though, I would say is when it's started.
So then this Race to Zero, we're gonna cut out all of our carbon emissions somewhere down the road. It was just like a very toothless thing that these people signed on for, so that they can get a little gold star that says we're doing something about the climate, when in reality they don't really have to do anything. That's what the Race to Zero was originally, right? I'm sure that there was some stuff and some hoops that they had to play through, but it probably, there wasn't real teeth to it, right?
So I think that the people who were behind it, this movement, were trying to get people in the tent so that they could eventually force them to go that route.
I'm not denying that.
But I would argue that the people who just joined it for the sake of joining it, some of them probably believe that this is important, but a lot of them probably just thought it was just a virtue signaling thing. Exactly. They wanted to make sure that they were on the right side of this issue from a marketing perspective and all of that. I would say that that's true. Probably. Well, I'm guessing, I'm generalizing, but I would say that's probably the case.
Well, I just remember, when the Paris Climate Treaty or whatever that was come up with however many years ago, the people around here that are very concerned about the climate and energy policies that are going on in the world in the United States we're like, oh yeah, okay, well, we signed on to that. This is during the Obama years. We signed on to that, but it's toothless. It's not going to, they're not going to be able to enforce this or that. We can say that we signed on to it, but it's pretty toothless. They can't enforce any of these things. And that allowed a lot of people, around here in this realm of things to kind of rest easy, knowing that it's toothless, it's whatever, right? But this just kind of shows you that something like this, something that's just like, oh yeah, you sign on to it, handful of years, maybe you have to do something, but I don't know. It's just that virtue signaling thing that you mentioned. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, even in the worst global situation, the worst timing ever to do something like this, they changed the rule book. I'm just reading from the article just to kind of emphasize what you had just said. Under the new policy, existing members would be required within just 1 year to phase down and out all unabated fossil fuels as part of a just transition. So suddenly this thing's got teeth. So it's suddenly there's some stakes to it. Suddenly it's more than just virtue signaling. Now we actually have to do something. And of course, representing $130 trillion in assets isn't just a couple of these, weirdo fringe groups that are signing on to these things. No, this is representative of a very large swath of some important industries in the world here.
Yeah, without a doubt. And the banks and the financial institutions that are involved are the biggest part of it, I think, because they aren't just in their own little realm, but they affect virtually every kind of business that there is, and individuals too. So when, for example, Bank of America or Citi or Wells Fargo or JP Morgan Chase, all of whom are in this group, say, we're going to phase out of all fossil fuels. Well, how can they do that? Not just directly, but through their what they call scope 3 emissions and scope 2 emissions. So just part of their business practices. How can they do that unless they're saying to individuals, we're not going to give you a car loan if you want to buy a gasoline powered car? Now, maybe not tomorrow, but at some point in the relatively near future, they have to. That's part of the package. That's part of the deal, right? How can they be part of this group and make that pledge without saying, we're not going to give money to a company that produces a part that's used in the fracking process? That's exactly what they're going to do. So you don't even have to be a fracker. You could just be someone that supplies, certain products to frackers. You could be the paper supply company of the fracking company, and
Right.
that would be enough for them to say, no, we can't do business with you. So that's the power of this. And it's not just the banks and financial institutions, it's also insurance companies. So you could have an insurance company say, whoa, UPS, you have gasoline powered cars. You're not switching to all electric. Well, then we're not going to insure your cars anymore, or we're not going to insure your buildings, or we're going to make you pay more to insure your cars, or more to insure your building, or whatever, right? The point is that this movement is all about forcing everybody, not just the companies that sign up, but everybody, all of society, to change and transform.
Right.
And they explicitly say, and I include the quote in this article, in the article, by the way, on Red State, there's links to all of these different original sources. So if you want to go see the letter, the policy itself on the Race to Zero website, you can see it. But a direct quote from it says, in regards to this policy change, quote, in practice, this, meaning the change, means corporations and investors must restrict the development, financing, and facilitation of new fossil fuel assets, which includes no new coal projects. This is just part of that's not even, that's just the sort of initial phase out part of this. That's not even the long-term goal of getting rid of everything. That's just the new fossil fuel development that they're saying you've got to stop doing this right now. But that's the whole point, right? The idea here is to create a transition plan that's going to kill the whole concept of using fossil fuels, not just in America, but in America and Canada and Europe, eventually globally, to go net zero completely. That's the goal. And this is another direct quote from the document itself. It says that there needs to be a transition plan indicating how they are working toward their net zero emissions commitments, including how they plan to go net zero for, and this is the direct quote, all scopes of emissions, both in their interim and long-term targets. For financial institutions, this includes all financed portfolio facilitated emissions. Financed / portfolio / facilitated emissions. All scopes of emissions. What does that mean? What that means is any connection you have upstream or downstream from your supply chain, your value chain. In other words, you cannot go, this is radioactive stuff. Anyone who uses fossil fuels is radioactive to you. You can't touch them. You can't go near them. You can't be friends with them. You can't talk to them. I mean, you can, but that's the idea, right? You can't go anywhere near these people if you want to be a part of our club. All right. And why do they care about being part of the club? Well, that's what the whole Great Reset's all about. So you're going to need to learn about the Great Reset. We've got tons of videos on the Great Reset, but that's what this is. This is the Great Reset.
That's what I was going to say.
That.
Yeah, Justin, all of these changes. What piece of legislation caused all of this to happen? What bills were passed that caused this new standard and all these different changes that are going to happen? None. That's what the power of the Great Reset is. All of this is done through this super cronyist system that they've established now to be able to incentivize and rework all of this under all of this umbrella of climate change and all of that, and how we have to be sustainable. All of this was ushered out through these avenues instead of going the legislative route. That is what is so insidious about this Great Reset concept and all of these things that we talk about routinely on this channel.
That's right.
Justin, you teased, unless you want to elaborate on that point,
no.
you teased an even crazier aspect of this guideline changes. Yeah, how could you get crazier than this?
Well, one of the most overt, this is really, it's important for a lot of different reasons, but I think the biggest reason is it highlights this theme that has existed throughout this Great Reset movement in a way. It really illustrates it in a way and highlights it in a way that really I don't think I've ever seen before quite in the same way. The key to all of it is coordination amongst all of the parties involved. Okay. They're all in it together. There's this idea that this kind of thing, which is part of the Great Reset, that this kind of thing is it's the free market. It's just the free market. It's supply and demand, and this is what they want and all. But it's not. It's collusion. It's essentially the mafia. Okay. It's collusion. It's a club. It's a group of people. They all get together and they are saying everyone has to go along with us. And if you don't, we'll destroy you.
Yep.
That's not supply and demand. There's no demand from the customer for any of these things to happen. Is the customer out in the street demanding that scope 3 emissions are reduced to zero? No one even knows what that is. No one's demanding that. The reason this is happening is because it's a top-down thing. It's not a bottom-up thing. That's what supply and demand is. Its demand is typically bottom-up, right? And it's driving the decisions by these businesses. Nope, not anymore. Now, this is the proof of just how closely coordinated all of these parties are. $130 trillion of wealth controlled, not necessarily owned, because BlackRock doesn't own all the wealth they have, for example, but controlled by all these people involved in Race to Zero and Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. The coordination is unbelievable. Part of the new policy requires that every single member of this group participate in a policy change called Persuade. It's called Persuade. And it will, this comes from my article, but I'm about to quote directly, and it will, in the group's own words, mandate that members, quote, align their lobbying and advocacy activities with net zero by proactively supporting climate policies at the subnational and national level consistent with the Race to Zero criteria. So literally what they're saying is, to be in the club, not only do you have to have a transition plan to get rid of all these people, to make anyone having anything to do, including individuals involved with fossil fuels, radioactive to you and your business and everyone you do business with, so that you can't even have a paper supplier who's driving gasoline-powered cars anymore. In addition to that, you have to actively take your massive corporations and go out and lobby every government you can at the subnational and national level to get them to impose this on all of society. That's what that's saying. This is, as far as I can tell, I'm not aware of another effort quite like this. This, I think, is the largest coordinated lobbying campaign in the history of humankind. I literally don't think we've ever seen this happen. Now, theoretically, I guess all these companies could drop out. I guess they could all drop out of the club. They could all wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, you guys went too far. We're getting out of here.
Right.
But I'm willing to bet literally anything that will not happen because of, again, you got to understand the whole Great Reset and what this is all is about. But the coordination, the benefits of the coordination far surpass any problems that might occur from having to lobby or having to tell everybody in the supply chain that you can't use fossil fuels anymore, or cutting off your oil and gas connections or whatever, right? The benefits to being in the club are much better than the costs of all of that. And the genius of it is, if everybody goes along with it all at one time, then there's really no disadvantage, because whatever disadvantage there is for you, there's also for all your competitors. So Wells Fargo is not worried about it because Chase is doing it too, and Chase isn't worried about it because Wells Fargo and Citi are also doing it, and Bank of America is also doing it. So they're not worried about losing out on business because they've all agreed. That's what collusion and monopolies and all of this other stuff is all about. It's the railroad tycoons all getting together saying, we're all going to do this, and you have no choice but to go along with it.
You're absolutely right. And this isn't like, a mustache twirling, cigar smoking guys in this dark room that are like planning this coordinated effort to screw everyone out of the, oil tycoon, whatever these people are, like the caricatures of them doing it. No, they're releasing press releases saying, hey, we're doing this. They're very upfront about this. This is like long gone are the days of the cronyism that you heard Milton Friedman talk about, where you've got these companies that are going to, government and trying to have some regulation pass that'll benefit them over their competitors. No. They've taken that quaint idea and they've concocted this massive cronyist system, unlike anything that I think the modern world has ever seen. And they've painted it. They put this nice little coating of, we're doing this, for equality reasons and for sustainability and climate change reasons. When in reality, it's just the biggest cronyist system that's ever been devised by man.
Yes,
it's absolutely insane that we're like sitting here and talking about this. I don't even know what to say.
And this is the genius of it. So the people who talk the most about the dangers of the monopoly man, the people who are most obsessed with this idea that all the corporations are just controlling society to screw over regular people, historically has been people on the left, right?
Sure.
This is clearly them doing that. This is clearly what these corporations are doing. So why is there no Occupy Wall Street type movement happening? Why are people not mad? Well, because they're doing it to advance a cause that the people who normally would be out protesting against these people agree with.
Exactly.
So now they're
veneer.
Okay.
That's that veneer of social justice and
yes.
Fighting climate change that they've painted over it. That's all it is.
You slap a woke
bumper sticker.
You slap a big woke sticker on your building, and all of a sudden it doesn't matter anymore what you do. You can be the monopoly man now because you're on our side. So this is totally what's happened. This is the robber barons, except internationally and on steroids on a level we've never seen before.
Right.
And this is the thing. The climate and energy part of all of this is the part that they've accelerated the most, the fastest in. But when you dig into the details of what the Great Reset is and what other kinds of metrics they're looking at and what other things they're talking about, it's not just climate and environmental stuff. It's all kinds of other things that they also want to do that are in their same level of coordination. They're not quite as invested in it like they are with the environmental causes, because there's money to be made there. That's the biggest reason why. But they're just as adamant that you have the right ratio. I've used this example a million times, but this is a real ESG metric that all these companies have signed up for. Many of them have signed up for. Do you have the right ratio of, say, Asian to Hispanic workers? Mm-hmm. Do you have the right ratio? What is the right ratio? I don't know. Someone has come up with that. And they have that as part of their metrics. They have this explains so much of the craziness and insanity that has gone on within our culture, but also just within all of these, especially within all these companies over the past several years. If you want to know why Coca-Cola is training its employees to be, quote, less white, and why airlines all of a sudden care about election integrity laws in Georgia when they have nothing to do with elections and they don't operate solely in Georgia, or why Major League Baseball is moving its All-Star game from Georgia to Colorado because of an election law, or why Facebook and all these other companies suddenly care so much about what you say on their platforms when they're making money regardless of what you say. It's all tied into the same thing. It's because they have built themselves a club financed by trillions and trillions of printed dollars that have been introduced into the money supply over the past 10 years or so, maybe 12 years or so. And they've built themselves a club, and they're trying to figure out who's with them and who's against them. And anyone who's against them gets destroyed. Anyone who's with them gets to take part of this ridiculous cronyist scheme that they've developed for themselves. And this is just the clearest example of it that I can think of is this Glasgow Alliance for Net Zero, Financial Alliance for Net Zero. It's so obvious what they're doing. They're openly saying you have to coordinate, you have to destroy all these industries. It doesn't say stop doing business with them if it's bad for your business, or stop doing business with only the companies that are really irresponsible. No, they're saying if you are involved at all with fossil fuels in any way, directly or indirectly, even if it just means you produce a product that they use, we're going to destroy you unless you get rid of that product. Or you change. This is control and manipulation and coercion at its worst. It's cronyism on the highest scale. They're all making money off of it on top of it. And they get to have this savior complex all while they're doing it and say, we're saving the world. And they all get slapped on the back. And none of the far left people are mad at them over it because it's a cause that they believe in too. It's unbelievable.
So many elements of like the Great Reset are encapsulated in this one story. Exactly. Just the amount of people, the amount of these corporations that have a stake in all of this, the amount of money that's being like poured into this from those interested parties and all of that. But then also, like, you can look at this from just a purely free market point of view and be like, okay, well, if they're investing in all this green energy and all this green energy actually can't compete with reliable energy, well, then they're all just like putting their chips on black when the roulette table is going to fall on red more oftentimes. But that's why that last part is so insidious. No, we want everyone involved in this to lobby their government officials as much as possible so that we get Green New Deal type legislation or some big infrastructure packages passed on a national level in all of these different member countries, so that we've got the government printing and pouring trillions of dollars into these industries that all of these people are invested in. It's unbelievable. It really is.
We've talked about this group before. We didn't mention it in this video yet, but a group called Principles for Responsible Investment, which is basically Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net, is very similar type of group. It's the same kind of people, same sort of idea, right? They openly tell the people as part of their recruiting to become a member, the government is going to pour lots of money into this cause. So you should sign up for this and join in, because otherwise you're going to miss out on all this money that's going to be printed. They openly say that. You can go onto their website and read their materials saying this is what's going to happen. So just make money off of it. That makes perfect sense. Well, you're exactly right. This is that, but it goes even further than that by saying, let's actually lobby the government to give us the money. So it's not just let's predict what the government's going to do. It's let's actually all get together with our massive corporations and massive wealth and massive political power and massive influence, and let's coerce them through lobbying, which, involves buying people off and everything else, as we all know, to give us money. That's what this is. It's so obvious that that's what it is. It's just no one pays attention to it,
right.
Except for the people who are in that world who are benefiting from it. They're the only other ones. It's us and them. And that's why people, and it's boring. Like, it's not boring.
What's G fans? What G fans race to zero?
Exactly.
What is AOC tweeting about? Let's talk about that instead.
Exactly. It's like, it's not sexy it is when you dig into what it actually is. It's very important.
Right.
Yeah. It's way more important than most things you'll see on the news tonight. But the reality is, on the surface, it looks boring. It looks like just another alphabet soup thing. You have no idea who any of these people are. It doesn't seem to matter. You have to do your research and your homework to understand why this matters. And frankly, this has been going on for a long time to varying degrees, and no one has noticed, or very few people have noticed. And that's been part of the problem, is people are just now starting to wake up to this happening.
Yeah. So much of this, all the setup of all this infrastructure was going on for a while. It just flew so far under the radar that it caught some people's attention, but not enough. And then because of this, let's pat ourselves on the back a little bit here, are shining the light on the Great Reset and all of this, and the true nature of all these ESG standards and everything that entails, has finally pushed these extremely important topics up from under the radar, right into the forefront. And entered the conservative lexicon. So that's the first step. That is the first step to awakening everybody to this problem.
And really, we can't even take total credit for that, because the real reason that we paid attention to it was because they were stupid enough to start using language that made it an interesting, like, we have to dig into this kind of topic. Before we weren't paying attention to it. When they started saying we got to push the reset button on the global economy, and every country must participate, and every industry must be transformed, and social contracts need to be rewritten, and all this kinds of crazy language about the social contract, we wouldn't have cared enough to even look into it.
Exactly. If they never started using the term the Great Reset, we might still not know about this. We'd be talking about the Supreme Court right now.
Yep, that's right.
Yep, crazy stuff. Any other last words you want to say about this, or are we going to wrap it up?
No. I think I guess if I was going to leave people with sort of a parting idea, if you are interested in understanding all of this kind of stuff, what's been going on with these various institutions, who the key players are, what their motivations are, and you want to see the documentation for yourself, and you think to yourself, well, I mean, I don't know, are these guys just crazy? Are they making all this up? It's just a conspiracy theory, whatever. There is a ton of information on stoppingsocialism.com. There's a topic in the menu section for the Great Reset. You can see direct quotes, sources, links, all kinds of things there. If you go to heartland.org, and on the front page at the top, there's a Stopping ESG banner that you can click on that has a whole bunch of information about ESG scores. That's the social credit scoring aspect of all of this. And then the most comprehensive thing that has ever been put together in the history of the world on this topic is the book that Donnie and I did with Glenn Beck called The Great Reset, Joe Biden and the Rise of 21st Century Fascism, which has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of citations that will give you all the information you could ever possibly need, piece it all together, show you how COVID fit into it and everything else, and where we're going from here. That's a great resource for people to use as well. You can get that, anywhere that books are sold. So check out those resources and pay and figure out a way to tell people about this without sounding like a crazy person.
Right.
Because
Seriously.
It's hard to do, and I get that, but it's like literally the world is being taken over by these gigantic corporations and working hand in hand with government and banks and insurance companies and financial asset managers. And most people are just going about their day-to-day lives, not even realizing what's going on. And it's the most important story, I think, in the world today. I really do believe that.
Right. And we are going to be covering it consistently here on the Justin Donald Save America show on Stopping Socialism TV. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you see all of our videos where we cover this pretty consistently. And it's the easiest thing that you can do, just hitting that subscribe button, leaving a comment underneath it, hitting the like button, sharing this content, all the easiest things that you can do to help spread the word of this, help us break through those big tech algorithms that prevent our content from being shown to more eyeballs. Justin, where else can people go to stay up to date?
They can follow me on basically every social media platform known to man. Getter, Parler, Twitter, Facebook, etc. at Justin T. Haskins. It's the same for all of them. They can also follow the Stopping Socialism accounts on all of those channels. It's usually at Stopping Socialism or some variation of that if they just type that in. And they can go to stoppingsocialism.com.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.